Bet horse racing on DRF Bets. We'll match your first deposit of $200. Get free expert picks and past performances, plus weekly cash back. All from Daily Racing Form, the most trusted name in horse racing.
Hi, everyone. This is the preview segment of Derby Watch. I'm Brad Free, joined by David Aragona. We're going to talk briefly about 3 Grade 3 races that will be run on Saturday in New York, California, and Florida. They're all Derby prep races, and we're going to start off with the Grade 3 Withers. David, the Withers Stakes at Aqueduct on Saturday, not normally another early season race that doesn't typically produce a Kentucky Derby winner. Am I right?
Yes, it hasn't been the greatest predictor of Kentucky Derby success. A lot of trainers don't want to run their horses a demanding 1 1/8 this early in the season. A lot of them are looking to stretch them out a little bit more gradually. So we're seeing a horse, Arctic Arrogance, who's likely to come in as the favorite, who already has some 1 1/8 experience, having finished a narrow second in the Remsen Stakes last year. I like this New York bred. I think that he's a horse who's shown some heart and versatility in his races, but it's still unclear where he really fits in the larger Derby picture.
Yeah, he's adding blinkers. I read, I think it was David Grenig who reported it, that he actually had missed a work going into the Jerome. He's adding blinkers on Saturday, scheduled to, so he should be tough. If he moves forward, I think he'll give Hit Show all he can handle. Hit Show was entered in the Southwest Stakes last weekend. Brad Cox already had 2 other horses in the race. He's going to ship to New York. So what do you make of Hit Show? Does he have a chance at least to, give Arctic Arrogance a battle on Saturday?
Yeah, he's a horse who garnered some hype off his visually impressive debut last year, but that race came back slow, and he's a horse who has been improving gradually, but he is still a little bit light on speed figures coming into this race. I liked the way he finished off his last race at Oaklawn Park with that short stretch going a mile. He really did finish powerfully that day and gives the impression that maybe at a distance will help him, but he's going to have to improve a little bit to bridge that speed figure gap between he and a horse like Arctic Arrogance.
Looking back on the history of the Kentucky Derby, I found it kind of interesting. We've had Derby winners who raced at Sportsman's Park, War Emblem. We've had a horse from Sunland, Mind That Bird, win the Kentucky Derby, a horse that ran at Turfway Park, Animal Kingdom, a Derby winner. Even Maximum Security, who crossed the wire first, he was a $16,000 maiden claiming winner, but we still have yet, at least since 1985, no 1-2 finisher from the Derby ran in the Withers. So maybe this year will be the exception. We'll find out. The Withers is on Saturday at Aqueduct, out at Santa Anita on Saturday. It's the Bob Baffert show. We talked about Baffert in the first segment, the review segment, and Baffert has all 4 entrants in the Grade 3 Robert B. Lewis. It's on Saturday. It's race number 3 at Santa Anita. Let's take a look at the field real quickly. Only one of the 4 Bob Baffert trainees, or one of the 4 entrants on this list, made the top 20 Derby Watch. And David, you and I, we kind of went back and forth on which of the 3 top ones to include. We ultimately settled on Arabian Lion, even though Newgate is probably the most accomplished. Worcester is still a maiden, but he's a maiden with a good figure last time out. What do you make of this small field? And then we'll talk briefly about the Baffert situation.
Yeah, we really could have slotted in any of these 3 short prices into our Derby Watch list. We just went with Arabian Lion due to the fact that he was such a heavy favorite last time in that Los Alamitos Futurity, but he didn't show up that day, so I think we have to see if he can get the 2-turn distance here. Newgate has shown a little bit of hang in his races. We've got to see if he can finish off a little bit more strongly going the 1/16 distance. And what do we get from Worcester, who is the maiden in this field? But I think it's kind of become the general consensus that he's another runner from this Bob Baffert barn, like Faustin, who's also on our Derby Watch list, who's supposed to get better with added distance, even though he hasn't gone a route of ground just yet. So I think Worcester is a horse that's likely to step forward, and it'll be interesting to see how he stacks up against his 2 stablemates drawn to the inside. But this is not the most interesting wagering race. No Kentucky Derby points will be awarded, with them all still being trained by Bob Baffert. So we'll have to see which of these horses progress, but it still remains to be seen how large of implications this will have on the Kentucky Derby picture.
A lot of questions hopefully will be answered in the Lewis. And by the way, Arabian Lion, this was not listed on the overnight, but Baffert said early this week that he was going to add blinkers to Arabian Light's equipment. If he actually worked 5/8 on last weekend in 58 and change, probably a little too quick. He was wearing blinkers in that workout. And Baffert said that he plans to add blinkers to Arabian Lion for his start in the Lewis. He wore blinkers first time out, Arabian Lion did. He won that race with the 92 Beyer, finished second in an allowance with blinkers off before he bombed last time out. He had an alibi last time out. I just don't know what it was. So we're going to find out about Arabian Lion. Newgate, I think you're right, David. He has a lot of hang in him. And I suspect, and even Baffert is not too convinced that this is a 1 1/4 horse. He said on more than one occasion, he thinks Newgate is more of a one-turn miler, and he had every chance to get past Reincarnate last time out and couldn't do it. As far as the significance of the Lewis goes, this race, it's early February, but this race has had a significant impact on the Derby. In 2009, Pioneer of the Nile won the Lewis, finished second in the Derby. 2012, I'll have another, won the Lewis, won the Derby. Dortmund won the Lewis in 2015, finished third in the Derby. And Medina Spirit in 2021. He won the Lewis, he won the Derby, and we're going to find out a little bit more about these three good, promising colts, and I suppose hard to figure as well. But again, the Bob Baffert situation hangs over this race. No Derby points will be awarded. Okay, let's go down to Florida. Talk briefly about the Grade 3 Holy Bull. It's race number 12, a 1/1/16, and they're going around 2 turns. I believe, David, that number 4, Cyclone Mischief, at least I would expect him to go favored for trainer Dale Romans off a fairly convincing allowance win last time out at Gulfstream Park, going 1 mile. What do you think about that allowance win and his chance to stretch out another turn on Saturday at Gulfstream?
I would say that I would be somewhat skeptical if this race hadn't come up as light as it has. This just is not the strongest edition of the Holy Bull that we've ever seen. And Cyclone Mischief is landing in a race that really might not be that much tougher than the allowance race he won last time. Of course, that was a 1-turn mile, and he's stretching back out to the 2-turn mile in the 16th here. But he has handled that distance in the past, did so when he broke his maiden. He is coming off Lasix for this race, which I guess some might be concerned about, but we're still learning a lot about these youngsters and whether or not Lasix really matters to them. So we'll see what we get from Cyclone Mischief. I think the other interesting horse in this race is another son of Into Mischief, the number 8 Rocket Can, drawn all the way towards the outside for trainer Bill Mott. Seemed like he really took a step forward with the added distance in his last couple of races at Churchill Downs. And he's coming out of a pretty decent allowance race himself, though he was the narrow loser that day.
Well, I kind of agree with your sentiments on Cyclone Mischief for a couple reasons. First of all, when a horse adds Lasix and jumps up and runs a career best figure and then comes off Lasix for his or her next start, I get a little bit leery. So there's that challenge to overcome. Secondly, I went back and looked at Dale Romans' record in winter, spring at Gulfstream Park. He has started 45 horses in the Holy Bull, Fountain of Youth, and Florida Derby. And Romans is 1 for 45 in those major 3-year-old prep races at Gulfstream Park. So I don't know. I think he has a lot to overcome, a lot to answer. He's a very promising colt, Cyclone Mischief is, but he has some questions to answer on Saturday. They actually all do. We should probably mention, David, before we wrap it up, there are a couple of allowance races this weekend at Gulfstream Park and Oaklawn Park, 3-year-old, one other than. Race number 8 at Gulfstream Park includes a colt that you kind of like. He's drawn on the inside. Talk to us about Tappet Trice.
Yeah, Todd Pletcher has 2 runners, 2 recent maiden winners in that 8th race at Gulfstream Park on Saturday. I'm pretty interested in Tappet Trice. Todd Pletcher obviously made the decision not to run in the Holy Bull with this horse. Perhaps the very short stretch of that 1 mile in the 16th configuration had something to do with it, because this is a horse, Tappet Trice, that takes a while to wind up. He can break a little bit slowly, makes a big run from off the pace. But I liked each of his first 2 starts at Aqueduct, both a maiden race over a fast track going a mile, and then last time out in the slop when he beat next out winner Slip Mahoney. Just feel like this is a horse with some talent who's supposed to get better with added ground, and hopefully we'll learn a bit more about him on Saturday in that allowance race.
That 87 Beyer earned by Tappet Trice was validated when the runner-up Slip Mahoney came back and virtually reproduced that figure, winning his next start. Over at Oaklawn Park on Saturday, it's race number 7, a 1 mile allowance, and number 2 Gun Pilot, a gun runner colt trained by Steve Asmussen. He finished second last time out behind Verifying. And I suppose that Gun Pilot, he's the 7-5 favorite. They're going 1 mile around 2 turns. If he steps up and runs well, he's going to further validate the form of Verifying, right?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing I'm looking for in that gun pilot race at Oaklawn is how that 97 buyer holds up for verifying that he was assigned in that allowance race, because I know that was a tough day to make speed figures. The track might have changed a little bit. It was the same day they ran a 1 mile stakes for older horses won by Ginobili. Verifying ran faster than Ginobili in that victory. So we'll be interested to see if that number really holds up, because Verifying, obviously, based on the buyer, took a big step forward that day and would make him a major contender on this trail moving forward. So we'll see if a gun pilot gives that race some validation.
Gun Pilot, the favorite in race number 7 at Oaklawn Park. In the Withers, it's Arctic Arrogance. In the Lewis, I'm leaning toward Arabian Lion. The Holy Bull, Cyclone Mischief, maybe. That's going to wrap it up for the preview segment of Derby Watch 2023. For David Aragona, I'm Brad Freen. We'll talk to you guys next week.